Liam, a young man with a penchant for the peculiar, browsed the dusty aisles of the thrift store. He loved old things, remnants of forgotten lives. His eyes landed on a tarnished silver pocket watch nestled in a velvet-lined box. It was beautiful, intricate. He had to have it. The shopkeeper, a frail woman with knowing eyes, hesitated. "That one's been here a while," she warned. "Bad luck, some say." Liam, undeterred, chuckled. "I'm not superstitious," he said, purchasing the watch. At home, Liam examined his find. The watch face was blank, save for a single hand pointing to the Roman numeral 10. As he wound it, the hand twitched. A soft click echoed in the silence, and the hand began to move, counting down. Liam frowned. He hadn't wound it that tightly. He checked the time on his phone. 10 p.m. The watch showed 9:59. A shiver ran down his spine. The room seemed colder, darker. The minutes ticked by, each one accompanied by a growing sense of unease. Time around Liam seemed to distort. Conversations lagged, as if everyone around him was moving in slow motion. Yet the watch ticked on, its pace relentless. Panic began to set in. Liam tried everything to stop the watch. He smashed it, soaked it, even tried to pry it open. Nothing worked. The hand continued its countdown, now nearing the 7. He was running out of time. Desperate, Liam returned to the thrift store. It was dark, abandoned. He found the shopkeeper's number scrawled on a receipt and called her. Her voice, raspy and low, sent chills down his spine. "You shouldn't have touched it," she whispered. "The clock chooses its keeper." She told him of a hidden antique shop, a place where secrets were traded like currency. There, he might find answers, a way to break the curse. Hope flickered in Liam's chest, a fragile flame against the encroaching darkness. The antique shop was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, shrouded in shadow and silence. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. A wizened old man, his eyes like polished stones, sat behind a counter piled high with strange and wonderful objects. Liam placed the watch on the counter. The old man's gaze sharpened, his fingers tracing the intricate engravings on its casing. "The death clock," he breathed, his voice a low whistle. Liam's blood ran cold. "It measures not time, but life force." He explained that the clock was cursed, a tool of a forgotten sorcerer who craved immortality. It fed on the life force of its possessor, counting down until their time was up. The only way to stop it was to pass it on to find someone else willing to carry the burden. Liam was horrified. He couldn't condemn someone else to this fate. But the clock ticked on, its rhythm a constant reminder of his own mortality. He had a choice to make, a terrifying gamble with his own existence. The old man watched Liam, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "The clock is cunning," he warned. "It will tempt you, whisper promises in the dark. Do not be swayed." He spoke of the sorcerer who had created the clock, a man obsessed with cheating death. The sorcerer had bound his life force to the clock, creating a closed loop. Each time the countdown reached 0, the clock would reset, drawing power from the current possessor and transferring it to the sorcerer, granting him another 10 hours of existence. A cruel parody of life and death. Liam listened, his heart pounding against his ribs. He looked at the watch, the hand nearing the 5. 5 hours. 5 hours until he was erased, his life force consumed by a long-dead sorcerer. He couldn't let that happen. He had to find a way out, a way to beat the clock at its own game. Section 5. A Race Against Fate. Liam left the shop, the weight of the curse heavier than ever. He wandered the city streets, his mind racing. The old man's words echoed in his thoughts. "The clock is cunning. It will tempt you." Suddenly, an idea sparked. A desperate gamble, a risky play against a malevolent entity. He raced through the city, the clock a ticking time bomb in his pocket. He found himself in front of a tattoo parlor, its neon sign buzzing like a beacon in the encroaching darkness. He had a plan, a way to trick the clock, to sever the link that bound him to its curse. He entered the parlor, the air thick with the scent of ink and antiseptic. He explained his predicament to the tattoo artist, a burly man with a shaved head and a skeptical frown. The man listened, his expression softening from disbelief to a kind of morbid fascination. "Let's see what we can do," he said, a glint in his eye. Section 6. A Desperate Gamble. Liam showed the tattoo artist a design he'd sketched on a napkin, his hand shaking with urgency. It was a complex sigil, a symbol of sacrifice and rebirth he'd found in an old book of folklore. He wanted it tattooed on his chest, directly over his heart. A gamble with his own identity. The tattoo artist worked quickly, the needle buzzing like a trapped wasp. Liam gritted his teeth, the pain a distant echo compared to the terror that gnawed at his insides. He watched in the reflection of the stainless steel tools as the ink spread under his skin, the ancient symbols taking on a life of their own. As the final lines were etched, Liam felt a shift in the air. The tattoo parlor seemed to shimmer around him, the boundaries of reality blurring. He looked down at the tattoo, the ink still wet. The sigil pulsed with a faint, ethereal light. He was out of time. Section 7. The Price of Time. The watch in his pocket ticked once. Silence. Liam held his breath, his heart pounding against his ribs. He felt strangely detached, as if he were watching himself from a great distance. The tattoo on his chest throbbed, a dull ache spreading through his body. He looked down at his hands. They seemed different, the lines unfamiliar, the skin pale and cold. He stumbled to the tattoo parlor's mirror, his reflection rippling like water disturbed by a stone. The face that stared back at him was his, and yet not. His eyes were different, devoid of recognition, his features strangely blurred. The clock had reset, the hand back at the 10. But something was different. Liam no longer felt the crushing weight of the curse, the suffocating fear. He was free, but at a terrible cost. Section 8. A Cruel Twist. Liam left the tattoo parlor, his steps slow and uncertain. The city lights seemed to swim before his eyes, the sounds of the street muffled and distorted. He no longer knew who he was, his memories fragmented, his sense of self shattered. The sigil had worked, but it had taken its due. He reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the silver watch. It was cold to the touch, inert. He looked at his reflection in a shop window, barely recognizing the stranger staring back. His face was blank, a canvas wiped clean. He was a blank slate, a vessel waiting to be filled. He knew what he had to do. He slipped the watch into the pocket of a nearby coat, a coat belonging to a man who had just walked into a coffee shop. Liam watched as the man took a seat, oblivious to the burden he now carried, the countdown that had just begun. Section 9. The Unending Countdown. Liam walked away, melting into the crowd. He was nobody and everybody, a ghost in the machine of the city. He had cheated death, or perhaps death had cheated him. He no longer feared the clock, but pitied it, trapped in its own twisted game, forever seeking a way out that would never come. He knew the cycle would continue. The watch would tick down, claiming its due. And somewhere, in a forgotten corner of the world, a sorcerer would cling to existence 10 hours at a time, sustained by the stolen life force of strangers. The curse lived on.